July 10. Mark it, circle it, tattoo it on your mind if you have to, because something is shifting, and not in that vague horoscope reading kind of way. No, this is sharper, heavier. It's the kind of warning that doesn't knock politely. It breaks the door off the hinges and stands over you while you're still trying to rub the sleep out of your eyes. And here's the thing. It's not coming from fear, not this time. It's coming from love. Desperate, blood-smeared, scream in the middle of a burning room kind of love. The kind that doesn't care if you're comfortable. The kind that will embarrass itself if it means saving you. The kind that begs. Can you imagine that? Begging. The one who could erase you with a thought. Pleading with you like you're the one holding all the power. They always tell you to trust your gut, but they never warn you what it feels like when your gut starts screaming and no one else hears it. Like a siren inside your bones, wailing at full volume while the world just keeps scrolling. And you question it. Because that's what they trained you to do. Doubt your own alarms. They say you're paranoid, dramatic, overreacting. So you start gaslighting yourself, don't you? Who you are, convincing yourself that the unease, the tightness in your chest, the sense that something's off, that it's all in your head. Meanwhile, something dark and real slithers right under your nose, and you're too polite to call it out. That's how it gets you. Not with chaos at first, but with comfort. Slow, seductive, perfectly disguised as routine. You start waking up tired. You start avoiding mirrors. You laugh, but it's hollow. You smile, but it doesn't reach your eyes, and little by little you stop noticing. You stop fighting. You stop feeling. You tell yourself you're just growing up, settling down, being realistic. What a cute word for dying quietly, piece by piece. You think you're safe because everything looks fine on paper. Bills paid, heart beating, no one's crying, but safety isn't the absence of chaos. Real safety is knowing who you are when everything falls apart, and right now, most people don't know who they are. They only know the version they were taught to become. Obedient, predictable, hollowed out and well-behaved. And then they wonder why their soul feels like it's been evicted. Let's call it what it is. Numbness isn't peace. Distraction isn't healing. And being busy all the time doesn't mean you're living. That's the scam. Keep you so occupied that you don't notice your cage. Dress the bars up with goals and responsibilities and polite conversations about the weather. Keep the volume up, just loud enough that you can't hear the voice inside you that's been begging for silence. Not the kind of silence that feels like loneliness, but the kind that strips everything away and leaves only truth. And here's the part that burns. The warning always comes before the collapse. Always. Maybe not how you expected. Maybe it wasn't thunder or lightning or a prophet in a robe. Maybe it was that friend you ignored because they saw too much. Maybe it was that breakdown you brushed off as just a bad week. Maybe it was that one night you cried so hard you couldn't breathe, but the next morning you shoved it down and called it strength. It wasn't strength. It was suppression. And it's poisoning you. You've been breathing in lies like oxygen. Lies about who you are, what you deserve, how much of yourself you have to kill to be loved. And now the truth wants out. That's the warning. Not a threat. A mercy. A final knock before the door gets kicked in, before the version of you that you built to survive gets obliterated by the version of you that was born to live. But you have to be willing to hear it, not just listen. Hear. Let it cut. Let it sting. Let it ruin the fake peace you've been clinging to like a security blanket soaked in gasoline. Because if you don't, this world will gladly give you a role to play, a mask to wear, a life that fits so perfectly you'll forget it was never yours. And they'll clap for you. They'll say, look how put together you are. They'll admire your discipline, your composure, your productivity. Meanwhile, your soul will be screaming into a void, and you'll call it adulthood. So here it is, plain and ugly. July 10 isn't just a date. It's a mirror. And some of you are about to find out you don't like what's staring back. Not because you're a bad person, but because you've been lying to yourself for so long, the truth feels like betrayal, but it's not. It's rescue. A violent, necessary rescue from a system that profits off your silence. Do you ever notice how people beg for signs, cry out for answers, and then when they finally get one, they flinch? Yeah, it's almost funny, almost. Like asking for a wake-up call and then smashing the alarm clock when it rings. They want God to speak, but they want Him to whisper softly while they're still tucked under the covers of denial. What they don't want is truth. Raw, unfiltered, inconvenient truth, because truth doesn't come wearing perfume and polite words. It doesn't show up with a nice little bow on it asking, is now a good time? No. Truth kicks in the door, drags you by the collar, and forces you to look at everything you've been pretending not to see. That voice in your head, the one you've been muting with noise, with scrolling, with substances, with pretending to be someone you're not. Yeah, that one. That's not madness. That's not anxiety. That's not your imagination going wild. That's the part of you still alive, still listening, still trying to reach you through all the static. And what's wild is how afraid you are of it. Because if you really stop to listen, you might have to change. You might have to let some people go. You might have to admit you've been wrong. You might have to confront the parts of yourself you buried years ago because they didn't fit the script. See, the truth doesn't care about your image. It doesn't care how many people follow you, how polished your profile looks, how well you play the game. Truth shows up with blood on its hands and asks, are you ready to stop lying now? But most people say no. They cling to the lie, not because it's beautiful, but because it's familiar. That's the real addiction. Familiarity. You'd rather stay in a burning building than face the unknown of the exit. And that's the tragedy, isn't it? You're not trapped. You're choosing the cage because you've convinced yourself the key must be outside of you. You keep waiting for someone to come rescue you, validate you, save you, but no one's coming because he already called your name, already handed you the key, already ripped open the veil, and instead of walking through it, you blinked, shrugged, and went back to pretending. They made you fear your own power. They told you obedience was holiness and silence was strength. They trained you to confuse meekness with wisdom, compliance with goodness. And now you hear the call to rise, and it sounds like rebellion. But it's not. It's resurrection. And yeah, resurrection looks messy. It looks like leaving behind everything you thought would save you, your comfort, your control, your carefully constructed identity. It looks like dying before you die, but you'd rather numb it, patch it, paint over it, dress the wound up in affirmations and positive vibes. That's cute, that's convenient, but it won't hold when the storm hits. And the storm is coming, not because God is cruel, but because He's been too kind for too long. He's let you sit in your fantasy, hoping you'd wake up on your own, but you didn't. So now he's shaking things, stripping things, not to break you, but to reveal you. Because the version of you that's been surviving isn't the version that was meant to lead. You've been playing small, not because you're humble, but because you're afraid. Afraid of what happens when people see who you really are. Afraid of what gets exposed when you stop performing. Afraid of what you'll lose if you actually step into your calling. So you stall, you shrink, you wait for another sign, another confirmation, another excuse to stay where it's safe. But here's the thing. Safety is a prison when it comes at the cost of your soul. And the longer you delay, the louder the consequences get, not as punishment, as mercy, divine mercy. Because if he didn't shake you, you'd settle. If he didn't disrupt you, you'd decay slowly in your comfort. And that's not love. That's slow death dressed as normalcy. And he loves you too much for that. So now the warning isn't gentle, it's urgent. Not because you're running out of time, but because you've already wasted too much of it pretending you didn't hear him. But you did. You heard him. You know you did. Funny thing about purpose. Everybody wants it until it shows up. You think it's going to be a parade, a spotlight, applause echoing in the background while the heavens open and say, "There it is, champ. That's your path." But no, it doesn't work like that. See, purpose shows up more like a confrontation than a celebration. It doesn't pat you on the back. It slaps you across the face and asks, how long are you going to keep playing small? And you've always felt different, haven't you? Like you were born with something louder inside, something a little more stubborn, a little less willing to follow the script. They called it attitude, arrogance, even madness. But you knew deep down that wasn't it. It was awareness. It was a knowing, a fire you couldn't explain. The problem is you started believing them. They said, sit down, be nice, stay quiet. So you tried. Oh, how you tried. But it never fit, did it? Because purpose doesn't shrink to make others comfortable. It doesn't blend in. It doesn't play dress up just to avoid judgment. Purpose is disruptive. It gets under your skin. It haunts your sleep. It makes the life you settled for feel like a straitjacket. And when you ignore it long enough, it starts breaking things. Relationships, routines, comfort, all of it. Not because it wants to hurt you, but because it refuses to let you rot politely. You were never meant to be normal. You were meant to be necessary. There's a difference. Normal fits in. Necessary shifts things. Normal waits for permission. Necessary acts. And yet, you keep trying to smother your necessity so you can be digestible to people who wouldn't recognize destiny if it punched them in the face. You keep diluting your calling to avoid intimidating people who benefit from your silence. Let's get something straight. Your gifts, not accidental. Your pain, not pointless. Your instincts, not imaginary. You've been equipped for something most people couldn't stomach. That's why you feel out of place. That's why you question everything. That's why nothing feels good enough. Because your soul wasn't designed for mediocre. It was forged for impact, for war, for revolution. But revolution doesn't come from comfort. It's birthed in tension, in frustration, in being so sick of pretending that the risk of authenticity becomes worth it. That's where purpose lives, not in your highlight reel, in your shadows, in your scars, in every breakdown you barely survived. That's where the gold is, and you keep walking past it, thinking you're broken, when really, you've just been misinterpreting your blueprint. You're not too much. You're not too intense. You're not too complicated. You're too awake. You've seen too much, felt too much, lost too much to keep playing dead for the approval of people who've never looked in the mirror long enough to find their own fire. And yet, here you are. Stop waiting. Nobody's coming to crown you. The calling already did that. The moment it whispered your name, it set you apart. Not above, apart. Set apart for something heavier, something higher. That's why it's been harder for you. That's why you've been misunderstood. That's why you've had to unlearn everything they taught you, because what you're carrying can't be contained by tradition. It's bigger than logic, bigger than reputation, bigger than comfort. And yeah, it's scary. Because when you finally accept it, when you stop resisting and start remembering, you lose the luxury of hiding. You lose the privilege of pretending. You don't get to be invisible anymore. You don't get to blend in. Because now you've got eyes on you, and not the kind that judge, the kind that need. People who are silently waiting for someone to go first, to break the mold, to live loud enough that it makes them question why they ever settled for quiet. And guess what? That someone is you. You didn't choose it, it chose you. Not because you're the strongest, but because you're willing to bleed in public, so others know they're not alone. Because you've walked through fire and still chose not to become ash. Because even when you wanted to quit, something in you said, not yet. You ever notice how silence screams the loudest? Not the noise, not the chaos, but that silence that creeps in when the world turns its back, when the crowd stops clapping, when the spotlight fades and you're just there, alone. That's where the real war begins. Not on stages, not in boardrooms, not in battles with others. Inside you. That quiet little war between the voice that says, keep going, and the one that whispers, you're done. And most people, they never talk about that one. They pretend it's not real, dress it up in fake smiles and forced positivity, like a clown painting over a cracked mask. But you know better. You've felt it, that pull. That tension between the life you're living and the life that's calling you. The one you try to ignore every time you scroll, every time you numb yourself, every time you busy yourself with people and places and problems that don't belong to you, because if you stopped, if you really got quiet, you'd hear it again. That undeniable truth breathing under your skin. And truth, it doesn't negotiate. It doesn't wait around while you keep chasing distractions. It doesn't care about your excuses, your schedule, your fear. It just keeps knocking and knocking. That's the thing. The calling won't shut up. You can drown it, delay it, deny it, but it's still there, mocking your apathy, haunting your comfort, showing up in your dreams like a ghost that won't leave until you finally say, all right, I hear you. But most people never get that far. They're too afraid of what happens when the masks come off, when the coping mechanisms collapse, when the truth stands there naked in front of them, saying, so, what now? You know what's dangerous? Not pain, not failure, not even heartbreak. It's numbness. That slow, creeping death where nothing hurts but nothing excites you either. Where you go through the motions, check the boxes, smile at the right moments, but you're hollow behind the eyes. That's the real sickness. And it spreads fast, because the world loves zombies, loves people who are easy to control, predictable, compliant, people who don't ask questions. People who never rebel. People who accept less than they were promised because someone told them it was realistic. Let me tell you something. Reality isn't neutral. It's created. Every day you either reinforce someone else's design for your life or you rewrite the blueprint. And rewriting it, that's messy. That's scary. That costs. It costs relationships. It costs routines. It costs illusions. But it buys freedom. And freedom, that's the currency of the chosen. Not comfort, not certainty. Freedom. And the price is everything you thought you needed? That's why you've been feeling the pressure lately. The restlessness, the agitation. It's not anxiety, it's awakening. Something in you knows the clock is ticking and you're not where you're supposed to be. You've been delaying, stalling, convincing yourself you're not ready, when deep down you know you've already been prepared in ways you can't even explain. It's not about knowing all the steps. It's about taking the first one while everything in you screams, "What if I fall?" And the answer is, yeah, you might. But you also might fly. They never taught you that part. They taught you to fear falling, fear failure. But what they didn't teach you is that falling isn't fatal. Staying down is. You get up. You move, you learn, you lose, you bleed. But you don't stop. Because stopping, that's the real betrayal. Not of others, of yourself, of the version of you who dreamed before the world told you to shrink. You don't owe this world your obedience. You owe it your fire. And if that fire makes people uncomfortable, good. Let it burn their lies. Let it torch their illusions. Because if the truth sets people free, then fire reveals it. And maybe that's why you're here. Maybe you weren't sent to fit in. Maybe you were sent to ignite something. Something sleeping. Something sacred. Something they tried to bury because they feared what would happen if it ever woke up.